The Philippines is a country of 86 million people. The majority are Catholic, and Easter in the capital Manila is the most devout time in the religious calendar. But this Easter, Manila was on high alert for terror attacks, and it was the minority Muslim population from the southern island of Mindanao that provided the main suspects. Australia, the UK and the US all issued warnings for their citizens to stay away from public centres like shopping malls. For the Americans, who already have troops in Mindanao, this area is a prime focus for their war on terror.
There is training, there are bomb making, there are experts who have come here, JI experts who have trained others how to make bombs.
On Valentine's Day this year, 20 people were injured when a bomb placed on a bus was detonated here at a busy central Manila bus terminal. The bomb was timed for detonation inside the terminal, where it would cause maximum casualties. Simultaneous bombings took place in the cities of General Santos and Davao in Mindanao. 12 people were killed and more than 100 injured in the bombings, and the notorious Abu Sayyaf group claimed responsibility. In response, the Philippine government reacted harshly when the opportunity arose. In March, these elite troops from the Philippine Police Special Action Force stormed into Bicatan Jail in Manila after weapons had been seized from the prison guards by 2 Abu Sayyaf members. The police response left 27 prisoners dead, including 3 senior commanders of Abu Sayyaf. Most of those killed had not been convicted of any crime, and opposition politicians like Ana Teresa Barraquel suspect that many of those killed may have been deliberately executed.
Well, my party Akbayan was really very disturbed that so many were killed, and only a few so far have been reported to have been armed, actually. So, for example, on the first level of that prison where 10 people were found dead, only 3 were armed. And then we asked, why were all of the leaders killed, including Commander Robot, who was already severely disabled. Even the lead negotiator of the group was killed.
I'm on my way to Mindanao, 500 kilometres south of Manila. Ever since September 11th, the Americans identified this troubled island as a major target for their war on terror. But their claims of a terrorist hub are hotly disputed by the Philippine authorities, so I've come to investigate. What I find is a Muslim insurgency with a complex and long history. For 30 years, the Bangsamoro Muslims of southern Mindanao have fought a war against the central government that has left large parts of the island outside of Manila's control. Southwestern Mindanao is home to the Abu Sayyaf, said to number no more than 400 fighters. They are known as a criminal group involved in kidnapping and terror attacks, and are said to work with Jemaah Islamiah. A far more significant group is the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, or MILF, based in central Mindanao. They have 15,000 fighters and recently started peace negotiations with the Arroyo government. What's fueling the current debate is the American claim that the MILF also has links with Jemaah Islamiah, or JI.
What we do know, and what the Philippine government also knows, is that there are links between certain individuals, certain leaders of the MILF, certain factions of the MILF, and these terrorist organizations. And it is a concern to us, yes.
The MILF leaders are wary of revealing their position, fearing assassination attempts by the military who control the major towns. We are directed by phone to a secure location, beyond the area controlled by government troops. Mohaqmer Iqbal is a member of the MILF Central Committee and the main representative for the peace talks with the Philippine government in Kuala Lumpur. His troops are keeping a low profile due to the peace talks and wouldn't let me film them. Iqbal denies any links to terrorist groups.
So we are not terrorists, and we can never be in good condition with the terrorists, because we are a separate organization. We are older than the Al-Qaeda. We are older than the so-called Abu Sayyaf, so we cannot go with them. Yeah. It's like water and oil. They would never mix together.
I think certain portions of the MILF are still in denial. Whether it's conscious denial or not, I honestly don't know. But they don't seem to want to accept the reality that some of their colleagues, friends, leaders are in bed with JI.
What kind of evidence do you have of those leaks?
There are, the main information that I could divulge here is that certain JI operatives have been arrested by the Philippine authorities, and they have admitted freely that they have these links with MILF and with ASG.
Okay.
But there's a great deal of evidence in all various channels that it's conclusive that there are links between certain factions of the MILF and JI.
The alleged JI operative with the most recent evidence of a link to Mindanao's rebel groups was arrested there in March. He is now held here in Fort Bonifacio in Manila. Romat says he has been in Mindanao training members of the Abu Sayyaf group, or ASG, in military tactics and bomb making since 2000. How many Abu Sayyaf have you trained?
Maybe 60, sir.
Okay.
60 men. But just 30 complete and 30 the training not complete.
Okay. He explained to Dateline the MILF had assisted in the supply of JI camps based in their areas and of their involvement in the Valentine's Day bombings in Davao and General Santos.
Davao and Jensan, member of MILF, the making bombing and deploy the bombing are order from ESG. Order from ESG and finance from ESG.
And these MILF members, who were they? Do you know who they are?
Yes, I know, but maybe the name, hide the name.
You can't tell them?
Yes, just...
Okay. During the interview, I was surrounded by military intelligence officers. I was only allowed to film the suspect himself, not those on either side of him.
I know.
Many of my questions went unanswered.
What?
Have any Australian officials or American officials come to interview you since you were arrested? I felt throughout this interview that Romat was looking for guidance from his military handlers and that his answers were not necessarily his own. Professor Luigi Adoro at the University of the Philippines says it's not uncommon for the military to provide suspects who say what the military wants them to.
I mean, there's no way of saying how credible these statements are, but there is the suspicion that he's saying, he's speaking according to a scripted, to something scripted. It fits very nicely into the military thing. And that does work in favor of the idea that maybe negotiations should be cut off and that the MILF is a terrorist group.
Even the Chief of Staff of the Philippine Army himself, General Efren Abu, seems reluctant to act on the evidence of Romat.
Right now, we cannot just go there in central Mindanao and run after these ASGs or JIs because we might encounter big groups of the MILF, and we don't want that to happen. We don't want to say that the MILF is harboring the JI or the ASG. As what I've said, we have been talking to their leaders.
I then asked the General what he made of the US statements that linked the MILF to Jemaah Islamiah.
Well, that is a statement coming from a foreigner. And maybe, they knew something which we do not know. But as what I have said earlier, we have been talking with the MILF hierarchy that is talking to us. So we respect their statement and we are comfortable with that unless it will be shown in the future that they really harbor the MILF.
Now, are you aware of any Jemaah Islamiah linked activity in MILF areas?
If they are operating here, they are doing it very secretly. And the only Indonesians that I know are those who were so-called arrested by Philippine government.
It's not surprising that the Americans might have suspicions about the Islamic links of the MILF. Back in the early 80s, members of the MILF travelled to Afghanistan to join the fight against the Soviets. They also developed links with the Middle East. Saudi charities and religious teachers became frequent visitors to Mindanao. Back then, these associations did not carry the instant tag of links to terrorists. The MILF claim that they remain an Islamic secessionist movement protecting an ignored minority. Why do you think the American government and sections of the Philippine government and the Philippine military continually make accusations that the MILF and Jemaah Islamiah are linked?
Well, I cannot, it's an injustice to say that what I am saying here is what the Americans are thinking or the military is thinking. But there are people, there are groups that do not want peace to be possible in Mindanao. So they are lumping together the MILF with these so-called terrorists so that the peace process would not proceed.
What is certainly true is that Mindanao desperately needs peace. For the civilian population, just moving around is a dangerous exercise. I'm driving out of Cotabato into the heart of MILF territory. This is the end of government control. Beyond here, you drive fast and need local contacts to minimise the dangers of kidnapping or theft from bandits.
Here, the Pentagon gang usually stop passenger buses and rob the passengers.
I've come to the village of Piquet, which is firmly in MILF territory and close to the areas claimed to be JI training camps.
Through him, with him, in him, in the unity of the Holy Spirit.
Father Roberto Layson has been the Catholic priest here for the last 8 years. Despite his religious differences with the MILF, he says the local population support them.
Support for the MILF is strong from Christians, from Muslim civilians.
There's a lot of talk in Manila about Jemaah Islamiah operating out of central Mindanao. Do you hear about that in your community? Do people talk about that?
I heard many of these talks in the media, but coming from local sources here, I haven't heard of any serious discussions about it. How could I rely on this information gathering of the United States, of the real situation here in Mindanao? That's very scary if you rely only on one information.
It is not hard to see why the American claims of JI training camps and MILF links to them are difficult to verify and are not well reported. In 2004, the Philippines was rated as the second most dangerous country for journalists after Iraq. 17 journalists have been killed since last year. As we were returning to Cotabato and government control, Froilan Gallardo, a local journalist, tells me how his colleague was killed in Hollow Island last November.
Without any reason. There was no reason at all. He was just killed by somebody who like him.
Back in Manila, the effects of the American pursuit of their war on terror in Mindanao is now a major issue in the Philippines. This demonstration is for the 32 labour and human rights activists that have already been killed in 2005 by the police and military. The demonstrators see a clear link between the government's war on terror, its attempts to extend the power of the armed forces through a new anti-terror bill, and US influence in the military. I asked this opposition congressman why he blamed the Americans.
Supplying military aid and supplies, equipments, and advising the military leadership, the AFP, and the Macapagal Arroyo government, how to deal what they call this counter-insurgency problem.
Conscious of this growing nationalist sentiment, the American acting ambassador ramps up the threat he sees in the situation in Mindanao.
Certain portions of Mindanao are so lawless, so porous, the borders, that you run the risk of it becoming like an Afghanistan situation. Mindanao is almost, forgive the poor religious pun, the new Mecca for terrorism.
Does the US State Department feel that the Philippines government is doing enough here?
Well, you could ask me if the Australian government is doing enough or the American government is doing enough. We could always do more. Is it the right priority for the Philippine government? They have so many issues to deal with. They have their fiscal crisis, they have an educational issue, they have taxes that need to be increased. Are they devoting enough time to the fight on terrorism? My personal view is no.
The embassy, eager to get across its point of view, and without permission from SBS, published the transcript of my interview with him on its own website 5 days later. The effect was instantaneous. The Philippine media were outraged by the diplomat's comments, and they became front-page news. His comparison of Mindanao to Afghanistan was widely condemned as alarmist. Mussomeli was called into the Philippine Foreign Office to explain his comments, whilst prominent opposition senators called for him to be expelled from the country. President Arroyo herself was forced to immediately call on the acting ambassador to clarify what she called his misleading comments. Mussomeli further aggravated the Philippine press by alleging he had been misquoted when called on to clarify his comments. A bizarre response considering his statements had been accurately published by his own embassy. The sharp end of this war of words over terrorism in Mindanao lies with these men of the Philippines Southern Command in Zamboanga. They constantly see combat and lost 33 men in the latest round of fighting, including a battalion commander. For Colonel Tutan, the realities on the ground are far more complicated than the Americans suggest. His men are not even fighting the MILF. Their problems are with the Abu Sayyaf group and other armed factions. Even with the ASG, he is not convinced the link to terror groups is firmly established.
If you say Abu Sayyaf, then probably some people, okay, they're a spent force. But when you say Abu Sayyaf with some JI, again, you keep on thinking about it. But it's just a projection of the entirety or projection that they are forced to contend with. We do not even know how big the alliance is there, if there is indeed an alliance or if there are elements here.
There is now a widespread fear in the Philippines that by linking the MILF to terrorism, the Americans will derail the peace process and further isolate the Muslims in Mindanao.
Our government uses the term terrorism. Unfortunately, they use it in the way that the US government does, which is a way that turns a blind eye to the roots of what we call terrorism, turns a blind eye to the very real marginalization and alienation felt by sections of the population in a country or felt by certain peoples.
The result could be the further radicalization of the Muslim community, creating another front in the American so-called war on terror.